Alrighty, welcome to the Family Business Podcast. This is episode, I don't even know. I think it's 10 or 11. I think it's 10. I keep saying it in the videos, and then when I go back and edit, I'm like, yeah, nope, that's not the right number. That's not it.
We should probably start looking it up.
We should probably check before we hit the record button. But we have a cool topic for today. I'm excited. He sent me a video late last night on procrastination. It's a piece of a TED Talk, and I'm particularly good at procrastinating, so hopefully this video has some good insights. I kind of watched a little bit of the intro,
skill
but
that I totally relate to. So
yeah. So, but we're gonna play a little snippet of this video, and we're gonna react to it now, and then I'll drop it on the screen and post. So
cool.
We'll hit play.
So in college, I had to write a lot of papers. Now, when a normal student writes a paper, they might spread the work out a little like this. And I would want to do that, but then actually the paper would come along, and then I would kind of do this. Now, I had a hypothesis that the brains of procrastinators were actually different than the brains of other people. And to test this, I found an MRI lab that actually let me scan both my brain and the brain of a proven non-procrastinator, and so I could compare them. So here's the brain of a non-procrastinator. Now, here's my brain. There is a difference. Both brains have a rational decision maker in them, but the procrastinator's brain also has an instant gratification monkey. Now, what does this mean for the procrastinator? Well, it means everything's fine until this happens. So the rational decision maker will make the rational decision to do something productive, but the monkey doesn't like that plan. So he actually takes the wheel and he says, actually, let's read the entire Wikipedia page of the Nancy Kerrigan-Tanya Harding scandal because I just remembered that happened. The instant gratification monkey does not seem like a guy you want behind the wheel. He lives entirely in the present moment. He has no memory of the past, no knowledge of the future, and he only cares about two things: easy and fun. Now, sometimes it makes sense to be doing things that are easy and fun, but other times it makes much more sense to be doing things that are harder and less pleasant for the sake of the big picture, and that's when we have a conflict. Turns out that the procrastinator has a guardian angel, someone called the panic monster. Now, the panic monster is dormant most of the time, but he suddenly wakes up anytime a deadline gets too close or there's danger of public embarrassment, a career disaster, or some other scary consequence. But there's a second kind of procrastination that happens in situations when there is no deadline. So if you want to have a career where you want to be a self-starter, something in the arts, something entrepreneurial, there's no deadlines on those things at first because nothing's happening at first, not until you've gone out and done the hard work to get some momentum, to get things going. There's also all kinds of important things outside of your career that don't involve any deadlines, like seeing your family or exercising and taking care of your health, working on your relationship, or getting out of a relationship that isn't working. Now, if the procrastinator's only mechanism of doing these hard things is the panic monster, that's a problem because in all of these non-deadline situations, the panic monster doesn't show up. And it's this long-term kind of procrastination that's much less visible and much less talked about than the funnier, short-term, deadline-based kind. And it can be the source of a huge amount of long-term unhappiness and regrets. I had a little bit of an epiphany. I don't think non-procrastinators exist. That's right. I think all of you are procrastinators. Now, you might not all be a mess, like some of us. And some of you may have a healthy relationship with deadlines. But remember, the monkey's sneakiest trick is when the deadlines aren't there. And we need to think about what we're really procrastinating on, because everyone is procrastinating on something in life. That's a job for all of us. And it's a job that should probably start today. Well, maybe not today, but sometime soon.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. For anybody listening, I'll try my best to put the video on like Spotify and stuff, but it's kind of funny. It's a TED Talk, so we'll put the clip, I'll link it in the description, make sure you guys have that there, but it's funny. He has some visuals on there that are pretty
at a minimum,
hilarious.
you could pull down the audio And just play the audio.
Yeah, I'm going to play the audio over top and everything so they can at least hear it. But
Yeah.
some of the visual stuff you can't get
It's hard to,
on video. It's a little hard.
Yeah.
But
For Spotify. But that's okay. We
Yeah.
could include a link in the bio or something so people could go watch
Yeah,
it.
for
'Cause
sure.
It's a great little video.
it's hilarious. Yeah, he's really funny. The way he just puts everything. It just he does it really well. The procrastination monkey or the instant gratification monkey, and then the non-procrastinator is supposed to be driving the ship in your brain.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny, but
And the monkey's like, nope.
right.
Holds on to the wheel.
I love the little graph in there that he showed of like how you're supposed to. He was talking about in college, how he's writing papers, and how you think you're gonna do it and want to do it, and then how it actually ends up. And it's like gradually spread out over time until the deadline. Then you work a little bit, at the end to get it done. And then he's like, this is more what it looks like. And then it's the deadline, and the bar for the last day is like all the way up.
Yeah.
That's how I went through high school.
That's how I went through high school and college.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how I still do it too. Sometimes like I'll have a presentation for BNI and I'll forget until the last
Wait
day.
till the last
This is the first time I've been planning it out. I was like talking to people about it today and like planning it out. This is my first time planning it out like 2 weeks
awesome.
ahead. But yeah, no, I like that at the end when he said everybody's a procrastinator.
Yeah.
Because it really is
true.
everybody. And sometimes we like trick ourselves into thinking that we're not. Right. But there is something, at least something, that we're pushing off and saying we'll do. We're supposed to do it today, but we don't, and we push it
Someday
off.
soon.
Push it off. Someday soon.
So interestingly enough, I would consider myself medium disciplined, not overly disciplined, but not. I've overcome a lot of the procrastinator that was in me in a lot of ways. But one of the things that was beneficial for me was starting a magazine company because everything was deadline driven, and people would ask me, they're like, "What's the deadline?" I'm like, I don't know. What do you mean? Like, I hadn't been in the publishing industry, but everybody making an ad, when do I have to have it to you? I'm like, I got to decide that. Right. It was me that had to decide it. So interestingly enough, I had to think about how to do a deadline. I had to build backwards from, it's going to take them 7 or 8 days to print and bind and trim these and mail them. So that means I've got to have it to them before then. And then it's going to take a certain amount of time once we get all the information from the cities, the writers, the graphic designers, all of those things to compile it and get it proofread and all of that stuff. So I had to start backwards and build our deadlines. And now when I meet entrepreneurs that are just starting out or thinking about starting a business, they'll say things and I'll say, create your own deadlines. And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, create a deadline that says by this date, I'm going to do this. Or set into your schedule, same time every week, nothing gets in the way, right? We video this and record this every single week on Friday at 10 o'clock, right? Only time we miss is if one of us is out of town.
Right, yeah.
And I think next time, if you go out of town, I'm just going to have Greg come sit in your place because it'll be interesting to see if we can get him to talk a little more.
Right, yeah. It's a little daunting, intimidating with us both chatting.
But I think like setting deadlines, setting schedules for yourself. So when I first started hiring, I had been a sales manager my whole career, but we first started hiring and I had salespeople, and all of a sudden it was like, we need to have a sales meeting. Like, I should know. I did it for 20 years.
Yeah.
But I never done it with my stuff, my people, my company. And so all of a sudden I was like, all right, every Monday at 9:15, we have a sales meeting. And it's still that way today. So that's been that way for years. And no matter who comes and goes and how many there is, every Monday at 9:15, we have a sales meeting. Every Monday at 9, we have a quick leaders meeting with me and my general, I don't know, I should call her general manager probably, but she's the back end office manager of all the accounts and making sure everything's quality control's done. But we meet for 15 minutes, then we have a sales meeting, and then we meet for usually half an hour or an hour after that to just go over things. And then we have a leaders meeting, which I don't go to because they use as an excuse to just pepper me with 1,000 questions. And I'm like, how about you guys meet, ask each other the 1,000 questions, and then come back to me, and then I'll talk to you about ones you can't figure out on your own, because there's plenty of stuff you can figure out on your own. But that's, to me, the way to be a successful business person is to set things up and say, no matter what, I'm going to do this way. And I'm going to do it on this day. I have a blog post due every Friday. So those all came because I self-imposed a discipline. I self-imposed a schedule. I work out Monday through Thursday at 7 a.m. every week, all the time. That's what I do.
Right.
That's how I get it done. It has to be in my schedule. It's not, I'm going to work out. Maybe I'll work out before work tomorrow, or maybe I'll work out after work tomorrow. It doesn't work that way for me.
No.
I have to put it in my calendar, and then I show up for it.
Right. Yeah, that's one thing that I definitely struggle with. I'm learning to kill that inner procrastinator, that little instant gratification monkey.
Such a great visual.
It really is. It's awesome because that's what it is.
Like, we know exactly how it feels.
I know.
I want to do this more than that.
Right. And I struggle with making deadlines. Like, that's one thing that I suck at, because I've always sucked at scheduling. For whatever reason, my brain is super unorganized, and so I have to force myself to like make a calendar, and I've gotten better and better at it. But that's one thing I've noticed is with RoofMax, there's not a deadline for things. I don't have that monthly date where where somebody else is holding me accountable,
right.
And I was listening to the TTD Touch the Dream podcast, Mauricio. He's actually in my BNI group, and
cool.
He's new. So I was chatting with him today, set up a little one-to-one with him, and he was like, "That's cool that you just started a podcast." And he has a really cool podcast I actually listened to.
Cool.
Part of an episode on the way here, but it was on accountability, funny enough. And he had some really cool insights in there and talked about the same thing. If you aren't, like, everybody's so good at being accountable when somebody else is on the other side holding you accountable, right? If you're working your regular, 5 days a week job, you got to show up at 9 o'clock, and you hit that snooze button a couple too many times, then you're not going to wake up.
Right.
But there's repercussions for that. Somebody is on the other end. There's consequences, right? Your boss is going to call you and yell at you,
right.
or you're going to get fired if you've done it before, which... The only real job I had with Howard, there were a handful of times that I did that, and luckily he liked me enough that he kept me around, but I sucked at that. And it's something I've gotten a lot better at, is
you sucked
waking
up. You slept like the dead.
I know, and I don't know why. I think part of it was just I'd stay up too late, just being an idiot. But like, one thing that's come from BNI, like going to BNI every single Friday, no matter what, I got to wake up at 6:30. I go to bed early on Thursday nights,
right.
because I know I will hit that snooze button if I don't get a certain amount of hours of sleep or
right.
whatever. But it helps me. Like, I'm really good at showing up and being accountable if I know somebody's going to be like, dude, you suck, or think that I'm an idiot because I don't show up to BNI or get kicked out of BNI,
right.
because you have to show up.
If your attendance isn't good, they'll boot you.
Right. And that's something I've been working on recently, is scheduling, making sure that I'm and I still suck at it. It's like fighting my brain tooth and nail to get myself to do it. But
I can't remember. It probably was last year. And I told you that. Do you remember this?
I do. Yeah.
And you're like, my brain doesn't work that way. I can't do it that way. And I'm like, okay.
Right.
But
it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Things don't get done.
The reality is, you don't want it to work that way, but you have to do something like that to be a high achiever. To be someone like we have. There's another guy in your BNI, drawing a blank on his name. I can see his face. The insurance guy. Kyle, yeah. As I talked to Kyle and got to know him, he's a very disciplined guy.
Yeah.
Every day he makes his cold calls. Doesn't matter. He has a time set out and he makes cold calls. That's why he's got a massive insurance agency, because he's willing to do the things that other people aren't willing to do. But the only way you really can do that long term is if you schedule it and then make it happen no matter what.
Right.
And it's a schedule in his calendar. And I used to do that when I sold Cutco. You've heard these stories before about phone time.
Yeah.
But I would put it in my schedule, and then I'd say, okay, it's phone time. I got to go do phone. Like, I did not want to do phone time ever. I never liked the phone when I don't care now, but when I was younger, I couldn't do it. I just was like such a mental case about it. But it was in my schedule. So I would go to the office, because I wouldn't do it at home. I'd go to the office and I'd say, it's my phone time. And the manager would be like, all right, great. And how many calls have you made? Like, that little bit of accountability helped me be more, disciplined, if you will. But I think any successful person, they set up patterns in their life. And those patterns are patterns that they know are going to lead to something. So when I first started the magazines, for example, I knew the primary goal I had to have was selling every day. So I would set out time. I'd work a little bit in the morning on stuff on the computer, and then I'd go to work. And I would go sell. I'd go knocking door to door. I'd go following up with leads. I'd put them in my schedule if I had a specific time. But if I didn't have a specific time, I was out making contacts. And I did that for months and months. And it was really difficult because we also had to create a magazine. And there was only 3 of us, Mom and me and Christina, our graphic designer. And all she did was lay out the pages. So any content that needed to be written, any content that needed to be gathered, we had to create. And I was gone all day. and gone doing sales, which is mentally exhausting. And so I'd get home and I'd be like,
Gotta sit at the
I got to
computer.
write a history story on the stump in North Ogden. Or, I got to write up this student of the month thing. Or mom would write something and she doesn't have a writing background. And she'd be like, I need you to fix this. I got to fix this. Like, it was just like so much. But
Yeah.
the truth is, I couldn't give up the selling. Otherwise, we didn't have a magazine. We didn't have the ability to pay for our magazine, to print it. So I really feel like that's a big piece of anybody's success is if you're going to turn out a good product or a good service, you've got to set deadlines and meet those deadlines. And then adjust them as you go too, because there's times when things just don't work the way you wanted them to, or they're different,
change or
whatever. Yeah.
I've noticed one thing with me, like I go through these, it's kind of like a cycle where I'll be really, really good at discipline and really, really good at holding myself accountable when nobody else is there. And then I'll have times, typically it hits in the winter when I'm like snowboarding and just, I can't hop on people's roofs. I'm not like out doing estimates and stuff, but I've found that
There's
I
not
can.
that natural drive for driving, because when you get a phone call and they're like, yeah, I need an estimate, that's easy to go show up
I'm
for
like,
that, right?
Sweet, yeah, like I'll put it in my calendar right now. I'll show up tomorrow,
Yeah.
whatever. And sometimes when there's not somebody, like one of the things that I hate, like I struggle really bad with, is getting myself to go knock doors.
Yeah.
I went and knocked doors for a pest control company, went out and knocked every single day, and I was really good at putting time. There were times where I'd go sit on the curb, for sure.
Sure.
It happens to everybody.
But you had
having a rough
somebody
day.
holding you accountable.
But I had somebody holding me accountable, and I've found with me, like it is so hard to get myself to go out and do it. So I'm getting better at, I have some time scheduled out today actually where I'm going to go. I have an estimate. I had another one cancel, and I'm like, you know what? Instead, I'm just going to drive around and I'm going to knock doors. Like I need to do it. I've been waiting to do it. Some of it is like I will put other things in front of it that aren't important, right? Like editing this podcast. It takes me hours and hours, and I'm still learning how to do it, so it's taking me a little longer. But I'll put that in front of, okay, I'll just go knock after I finish this video.
Right.
And then the video takes too long, and I'm like, I guess I'll just do it tomorrow, right? Same thing that he said. I'll do it sometime, right? But I found a way to kind of trick myself when I'm in that little rut where I'm going through that cycle, where I'll trick myself. It's a weird thing, and I don't know, maybe it doesn't work for everybody. Maybe it just works for me. But I will, even though, like, I'll acknowledge that I'm sucking right now. Like, I'll acknowledge, like, okay, I'm not doing the best right now. I suck. Like, this isn't very good. But I think a lot of times when you get in that rut, you beat yourself up too much. So you have to be okay with, like, okay, I can beat myself up a little bit, but then I acknowledge that I am going to do it no matter what. I might struggle with getting myself to do it today, but I know eventually I'm going to make that switch in my head. And then it's weird. When that switch happens, I instantly flip 180, and then I just go into, okay, no, I'm going to be accountable for the things that I say I'm going to do when nobody's there, or I'm going to, have some discipline. I'm going to work out every single day. Like one thing I've slacked off on is I haven't gone to the gym every single day like I was. And I think some of that has kind of switched because I don't know if I necessarily want to go to it. Some of the things have changed, like I've gotten into kettlebells and stuff, but I'm really not good at holding myself accountable when the kettlebells are sitting in my room, and I know I can just do it whenever, And so I don't know. I think setting deadlines is something I definitely need to work on and try to become better at, but hopefully putting it out there on the podcast when people are listening help me hold myself accountable.
So Shane Weiser, one of my favorite bosses ever, he had a saying that was, be careful of pain-relieving, non-productive work. And what that means is your brain knows you need to work. And it's like, you better work or you're going to feel guilty. And so then you sit down and you're like, I'm going to edit the podcast. It's pain-relieving, relieves that pain of I'm being lazy.
Yeah, right.
But it's non-productive. And when I would teach that to my salespeople, I would always say, don't do things that I'm trying to remember how I would say it, but it was like, I always said, knock when the sun shines, right? Knock when the sun shines. Because during the day, the sun's shining. If you're going to knock, if you're going to go to someone's business, whatever, when business is open, that's when you do those things. So that's why I would come home and have to write the history story, because I would work out selling during business hours. And then I would come home and do, non-urgent or non-time sensitive things. Like I could write the history story at 12 o'clock at night. Nobody knows the difference for when, maybe because my writing quality goes down after 9:30, but not non-productive work. But so how do you, what would you consider you're actually disciplined at?
I find that I'm actually really disciplined at things that I'm passionate about. Like when I really love something and I know I love doing it, sometimes I don't want to do it, but because I love it, I'm willing to do it, if that makes sense. So like for a while, I was very passionate about going to the gym, and I went every single day, no matter what. Like no matter what, even if my day was just completely stacked, like I'd go at 9 o'clock at night if I had to, right? And so sometimes, like right now, I haven't been doing that. But when I find those things that I'm like, okay, I love this, I want to. So sometimes it's also like I'm very fun motivated. So if I can give myself a little treat at the end of the day, right? Like I can go golfing or whatever, like that helps me become disciplined at certain things. But I don't know. I don't know if that quite answers the question the way you asked it, but
from a father standpoint, what I've seen is you have, and we call it a mania personality, where you really get intense on certain things for a certain period of time. So I actually think discipline will benefit you longer term, because like if you had, during the time when exercising came easy, if you had just simply said, and the reason I work out in the morning is because the day's too unpredictable. After the early morning, the day's too unpredictable. I can't tell you what's going to happen. Like yesterday, I had a very tight schedule, but we've been trying to get passport photos for months. And we went and got some taken, but they ended up not being the right background. And there was a new place that was just starting to learn. I went and told them, but they didn't have the right background, so they're going to have to get that. So we had to go to the post office. And yesterday was their open hours where you could show up during the day before 12:30 and get passport photos and turn things in. If you didn't get it done, we're going to have to miss our cruise coming up in a few months, right? So I went and did that, and I had to throw it into my day. So it's too unpredictable during a day. You might get a referral, an estimate. You show up, you do the estimate. The neighbor comes out, and they're like, "Come give me an estimate too." Yeah. You go down to their house and do an estimate. Like there's too many unpredictable things. So for me, things like working out, I have to schedule it at a time where I know it won't be interrupted, and then it's in my schedule. And if somebody else tries to take that time, I very rarely let that happen.
yeah.
I just say, sorry, I can't, that's not a time I can make. So I think that piece of mania in you, when you have that, what would be wise is to set some patterns and habits so that you can continue past the point when it's no longer exciting.
No longer a mania. And I've done that actually a handful of times with working out as an example. But it's funny that you say that, because actually what happened was I stopped going as soon as spring hit last year. As soon as spring hit, we just had an influx of work and stuff. And I, in the winters, like to sleep in a little bit. I'll sleep in till like 8:30, 9 typically. When in the summer I'm waking up at 7, But I like to I like to start working out after I've eaten and all that stuff, and then it's usually like 10 o'clock when I'm 10, 11 when I'm done with my workout. But that doesn't work as soon as Roof Max time starts, because people are like, oh, you got to be here in the morning. Like you got to be here at 8:30, 9, whatever, And so that was actually what happened is my days got so unpredictable. I had random people calling me saying they wanted bids, and it just kind of got pushed to the side. It's like, okay, we'll do it later. But then I come home after a long day and I'm tired, and I kind of push it off till tomorrow, right? So that's something I definitely need to work on, is more like a daily schedule where it's like I'll plan things out, I'll set reminders for myself, but I don't have like a daily routine. I don't wake up and do this and do that and do this. And so I've been working on it, and sometimes it takes me a second to really like flip that gear in my brain,
and I think that's normal.
Yeah.
I think people think, oh, I'm just a procrastinator. Like he said at the end of that video, all of us are. We all have that somewhere. But the people, when I look up to others, and like the ones that are on my mind right now are Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. They were famous for being at the gym before anybody else and staying at the gym longer than anybody else. They had such a mania for being the greatest that it literally like ruled their life, and there was nothing getting in the way. To do that over a long period of time, like both of them did, 20 plus years, it takes a tremendous amount of discipline. And not everybody's that disciplined. There's a quote by Stephen L. Covey. He's like the son of Stephen R. Covey. I can't remember his middle initial. He took over the Stephen Covey when Stephen Covey not passed away, but retired. he took over and ran the business. And he said character, and I'm going to butcher this, but character is the ability to continue doing something after the initial excitement is worn off. It's that ability to keep going when you don't want to, when you don't want to go work out.
Yeah.
And it's hard. Like I said, I work out 4 times a week, and I missed two this week. One of them, our workout instructor canceled on us, but the other one, I couldn't sleep. And so that next morning I was like, I can't go work out.
Right.
I could have.
Yeah.
I just chose not to.
Right.
So that long-term discipline, it's tough.
For sure. Yeah, I feel like I'm really good at justifying things too.
We all
Like the non-productive work that you're talking about, the pain-relieving non-productive work, I'll justify it, like with the podcast, for an example. I'll put that in front of other things because I'm like, well, nobody else is going to do it. We got to catch up right now. We're behind on podcast. We've got 10 or 11 of these things recorded and only 6 or 7. We're catching up now. I'm doing it. But I just very easily just justify whatever that thing is. I'm like, oh, well, it's okay. I'll do this. Yeah. And so it's really, I think when I get in those moments where I'm really good at discipline, especially when I'm in one of those manias, I'm really good at recognizing, okay, I just tried to justify this. That means I need to do it right now, or else it's never going to happen. But I'm not always the best at it, for sure.
Well, and I'll say something to you. What's the revenue producing activity? Right. What are you doing that's revenue producing? That's hard sometimes because like my publishing business is ridiculous with busy work, right? And I think that's one of the challenges most businesses face. Restocking, inventory, putting things in place, doing all those things. And like an example is your sister, Lucy. She works at Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A is very fast-paced. It's a busy restaurant and it's a busy business. And some people have a capacity to work faster than others. And Lucy has that capacity. So she's often running, like in between customers, running back and grabbing the bag of ice cream, unfrozen ice cream, and refilling the machine when that's not even her job, primarily because she is a planner. And I wouldn't say she's no procrastination whatsoever, but she doesn't have it as bad as you or I had when I was young. She's Johnny on the spot on it. So they'll have to restock their boxes of, sauces, Chick-fil-A sauce and barbecue sauce and sriracha sauce and all those things, right? Well, they've run out during the day and they got to run back to the storeroom and grab them. Well, Lucy is incredible at doing that, even when it's not her. They call the position the sauce boss. So even when she's not the sauce boss, she'll see that they're running low. She'll run back and grab some. Well, I think that's great when you're a high-performing, like fast worker like Lucy is. That's awesome because you can fill in spaces where others don't. But if you're not, then you need to plan for the time to be able to do things. So one of my employees, Simeon, who you probably remember, one of my favorite, good friend, and he's awesome. He was an incredible salesman. He was late to everything. All the time, and it drove me crazy. And finally, I sat him down one day and I said, Simeon, you have an on-time problem. And he knows. It's not a surprise to him, so he knows. And I was like, you've got to get to where you can be on time. And the more we talked about it, he realized that he didn't set a deadline for himself to leave. Like if I need to go to Syracuse, I have to be in Syracuse at 3:00 or 3:30 today. That's a 40-minute drive from our house to be at Syracuse City office. So I know I've got to, and nowadays it's great because your phone, you can just put the address in. Right. It'll say this will take 38 minutes. And you're like, okay, perfect. I got to leave 38 minutes. Right. And there's times when even that isn't enough. I try to build a buffer because I'll set a time and I'm working on something in my office and then I'll walk downstairs and mom needs help with something. And it may only take 2 minutes, maybe 5, but those 5 minutes weren't built into my plan. So you've got to build buffers in. Mm-hmm. So I think setting yourself those little disciplines, those little walls, those little this, I have to leave by this point, that's super important.
Yeah. I used to struggle with the on-time thing, a lot, really bad. I'd show up to B&I late. I'd show up to, school late, pretty much every day. I don't think I ever showed up once on time. But one of the things that happened with RoofMax is I realized, okay, this reflects really poorly on me if I don't show up right on time. Sometimes you can't control it. There's traffic or there's gas, but I try to at least set up the expectation beforehand with the customer. I'm like, hey, listen, just give me like 15 minutes just in case there's traffic or I got to fill up gas or somebody talks for an extra 20 minutes to me because they just want to have a conversation and an estimate. So building in those buffers does help, and setting that up, especially if you have clients like that where you have an appointment, helps a lot if you set those expectations.
Especially in direct sales, because sometimes they talk more. And
for sure. Well, and sometimes it doesn't really matter to people if you show up 5 minutes late, but to some people that matters a ton.
Right.
It matters a ton because they show up 10 minutes early to everything because that's on time to them.
Like your mom.
Yep. And
she would rather wait in the parking lot than be late.
Right, for sure. Yeah. And I know a lot of people like that. I'm definitely not like that
not
naturally.
Like that.
But I realized that early on where I think I showed up to like one appointment late and I could just tell it bugged the guy. And I was like, gosh, dang it, that sucks. I could have had a chance to earn their business. And instead, they're hung up on the fact that I'm this kid that showed up 10, 15 minutes late.
Yeah.
And
well, even when I talked to Simeon, he said some of that stuff. Well, sometimes I come in here and I realize I'm out of gas. I'm like, if other people's, if you respected other people's times and their calendar, you'd make sure you had gas when you drive home at night.
right.
Not in the morning when you're driving to a meeting and you're now late because you got to get gas. Now, there's definitely, it's humanness, right? The other day, I was late for BNI on Wednesday, and it was because of a train. And I left in plenty of time, but I sat for 10 minutes watching this train go really slowly, and I'm like, ugh.
Darn it.
So sometimes you just can't control those things. And even if you build in a buffer, sometimes that buffer isn't enough for things that happen like that. So there has to be a humanness to it. But if you have a reputation for always being late,
right.
they're just like, it's just another excuse. You got to train this time. But if you have a reputation of being on time, then they'll definitely accept that. Oh, I understand. That happens to me sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Different reception. So I think patterns are crucial for any business person to be successful. Set up patterns. Set up something that you do all the time, every week, no matter what. So what are some patterns that you're setting right now? What are some things that you can know you're doing the same time every week?
Like the one thing that I've been setting up is just kind of how I start my day. I've always sucked at like doing the hard things right when I wake up, which is like getting up and working out. So I've been making a schedule of I'm going to wake up, I'm going to work out. Even if it's like a quick, like it doesn't have to be much, like 30 minutes.
That's all I do.
Quick 30-minute workout. And then one thing that
I'm
haven't.
swole.
You're freaking jacked, dude. You're getting big. No, you do look good though. You look.
It does help.
Yeah. Do you have progress pictures?
I have some original fat guy pictures, but
Yeah.
I'd already been working out. It was before I started losing weight, so I do have some pictures, but I haven't taken after pictures.
Right. It's crazy because I see you every day. So like I don't, until I see a picture, I'm like, holy cow, like you just look way better. You've been doing good. You've been going forever though.
Yeah, we've been going for 3.5 years, pretty regularly.
Yeah.
But it's that part, the pattern was easy for me. Here's an interesting part of this, and I think they actually are pretty tied together.
Mm-hmm.
I would look at people. So I'm a big guy. I'm 6'3". My highest weight ever was 286 pounds, almost 300 pounds. And at 6'3", I hit it fairly well. That's still really overweight. Right now, I'm about 235, 233, somewhere in there. So that's a significant drop, probably 50 pounds, 55 pounds, somewhere in there. But I remember looking at people because I was working out. When I was your age, if I gained a little weight, I'd just go to the gym a little bit and it would come back right off.
Yeah.
Now that I'm in my late 40s, it doesn't do that anymore. So I would look at people. There's one example that I can think of right now is I won a trip through Cutco when I was there to Hawaii. And we went to Hawaii with Mom, and she was pregnant with Cameron. And so we've always said Cameron had a draw to Hawaii just because she was there as a fetus. But
Yeah.
we went to Hawaii, and Bruce Goodman, who was the president of the company, a co-president, the West Coast president, East Coast president, he was the West Coast president, good friend and really neat man that I really loved. He kept going to this restaurant, and he was ordering this plate of breakfast food. It was kind of like a mix of German pancake, eggs, bacon, sausage. It was a mountain of food, smothered in maple syrup and all kinds of stuff. Anyway, it was this and he was so in love with this thing. But he was a very fit, very trim man by choice, not genetics. He was there by choice. And I just remember watching him and being like, how come he can eat like that and still be thin? So I actually asked him about it. And I was like, how do you stay trim and thin with eating this stuff. And he's
Right.
like, I only allow this on vacation.
Oh, wow.
And he's like, I don't eat like that unless I'm on vacation. It's that discipline. And I think that's a differentiator when you're someone who, like myself, I've been overweight and I've felt the ramifications of that. Your body does not like being that overweight. I'm still actually a little overweight, bigger than average. I'm probably thicker boned and stuff, but I could probably be in the 20s, 220s, even though the thing says I'm supposed to be 190.
Yeah.
I'm too skinny at 190. Like I
Yeah.
look skin and bones, but at 220, 225, it takes making those little decisions every day. So at our BNI on Wednesday, 2 people passed out candy. It's making the decision to say, it's 8:30 in the morning, I'm not eating that candy.
Yeah.
So I left mine there. Now, I know for some people that's not hard to do. For me, that's really difficult. There's candy there. There's a cinnamon roll there. There's donuts. I have to say, I'm not on vacation. And I had a trainer one time tell me, it's okay to party, just not every day. That's part of discipline too. And I think in order to stay trim and thin, and you've stayed in shape in your life. You're still young, obviously, but
Sure.
to do it long term, to be Bruce Goodman, who is probably maybe a little older than me. I think he was in his 50s when I was working with him. He was disciplined every day.
Yeah.
Just on vacation, he allowed himself. It had a Hawaiian name. I wish I could remember the name of that dish because I'm sure it's delicious and marvelous, but
Yeah.
it was a crazy amount of food. And in Hawaii, they eat a lot of food, right? They have big piles of food. So I just remember he was eating that every day while we were there for 7 days, and he's like, oh, I only allow that on vacation.
That's cool.
And even within that, he wouldn't eat big at dinner because he loved that breakfast so much. He would say, okay, I've eaten a lot already today. That takes discipline.
Right. Even though he's on vacation, he's not going to just let himself go all the way.
Right.
He'll let himself have little cheats, but then still have some of that discipline. That's cool. Well, we're running low on time, but I have one more thought. I didn't quite answer your question on like some of the schedule things. So, and one of the ways that I've kind of brought this about is it's, whether you believe in it or not, you might think it's woo-woo, but like manifestation, I don't think of it like that, but it's just programming my brain where I'll say, okay, I'm a disciplined person. I want to strive to be as excellent as I can possibly be. But when I say those things, kind of like a mantra in my head over and over, it becomes so much easier to make that decision when you wake up. So that's one thing I've been working on, is saying those things to myself every day. Like, I'm going to do this. This is not saying it like I'm going to do it, but saying it like you already do it is super important. Like it's already happening.
It exists in
like
the
it
world.
already exists. And it just kind of draws you, it brings it kind of top of mind. But back to the daily schedule thing, one thing that obviously the working out, I want to do that right when I wake up, do my push-ups, do my kettlebell swings, do all that stuff, 30 minutes. And then one thing that I have sucked at for the longest time, it's been a long time since I've been good at it, but reading books, like actually reading a book, sitting down.
Ink
So I'm
on
going to have
paper.
ink on paper, because I listen to books all the time. I love listening to books, but I feel like you lose some of that internalization.
You
So
can zone out a little easier.
zone out a little bit, or you start thinking about something else that's going on that day. So like self-improvement books too, because I like to read a lot of like fantasy and fiction novels. I love that because I don't know why. I just always have since I was young. But reading some sort of self-improvement book, something that's real, not fake, not some fantasy land. So that's one thing I'm going to build into my schedule, is making sure that my morning routine is really good, setting up those little wins. Like one of them is making my bed. I'm going to make my bed, even if it's quick, like just throw it together, make it look a little bit better. But I've been doing that recently where I'll just throw it together and I feel so much better the rest of the day. It's the weirdest thing. I've never made my bed in my entire life, and I started doing it, and as I'm working or as I'm doing things, like I just feel more productive. Another thing that I've realized is I need to set up, first of all, time slots in my days for the really important stuff. But then also there's really important stuff that I hate doing, and I have a hard time focusing on one thing. That was one reason why I hated school, is because I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to learn that. So my brain was elsewhere the whole time. So one thing that I've been kind of messing with and kind of seeing if it works, and it seemed to work so far, is when I'm doing those things where I'm supposed to be really productive, right? Like working on the newsletter. Like I've needed to work on the newsletter forever to send it out to our past clients because we need that customer outreach. I have hated it and not wanted to do it for the longest time because I just am not comfortable writing something and sending it out to people, right? But I can trick myself if in that time segment, if I'm switching to things. I have a really hard time focusing on one thing. So if I switch in mid-project, I give myself 2 things. Okay, I'm going to work on 15 minutes. I'm going to work on this. And then I get to a spot where I have a little mental block and I'm like, oh, I don't know what to do next. And I'll switch to the next thing. Okay, now I got to go answer these emails, pay these invoices. I got to call this person for 15 minutes. And I break that little section, whether it's 2 or 3 hours, into 15, 20-minute segments, however long I can focus. But I've noticed that my workflow gets way faster. I finish things way quicker. And so that's one of the things that makes me procrastinate stuff is I sit there and I get to 15 minutes and I'm like, oh, what do I do next? I don't know how to make this, but for some reason that works in my brain and it helps me not procrastinate those things because I'm breaking it up. It's kind of weird, but
I think as long as you maybe list out everything that's got to be done.
For sure. Well, what I've done is that slot, that 2 or 3 hours, I'll put 3 things in it, 2 things in it, 3 things in it, whatever it is. And then there's the stuff that has to happen, like estimates and stuff. I've got bids I got to run to today and jobs next week. But the things that need to happen, like a sales time slot. I'm going to go out and knock doors no matter what, rain or shine. I'm going to go knock doors from this time to this time. Give myself a 5-hour slot.
Well, I think there's organization tools for this. Project management tools help us with those things because some of them are too complex for one person, right?
Sure.
You can't do all the pieces all at once. Building a website, for example, creating a digital ad campaign, they take research. They take a lot of keyword research, looking into what you need to do. So it takes multiple people doing it over a period of time. And so I think that's a great way to do it. Have you ever seen a thing called a Gantt chart?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Gantt charts are built for that, just the progression of knowing. Now you have to sit down in advance and say, here's the steps that need to happen.
And plan it out.
But if you have 15-minute steps, you can work on that first segment the first day and then move it to the second segment and so on and so forth.
It helps a ton to break it up for my head because if I think, oh, I got to go work on the newsletter for 2 hours. Just the newsletter. I'm going to be staring at that stupid thing for 2 hours straight.
Drive you crazy.
It'll drive me nuts. I'll go crazy. I'm a very outdoorsy person. I hate sitting at my computer and doing the back end work. But a lot of times though, it is the pain relieving, non-productive work that ends up happening.
Taking up your day. Yeah.
Right. So, but I'm working on it. It's a mindset thing for me. It's just mindset. As soon as I can make that switch in my brain, then it just doesn't even become a question anymore, Yeah. But I know the scheduling thing is something that I'm working on mastering, and I've been doing it where I'll sit down not necessarily sit down. Sometimes it's late at night. I'm laying in bed. I'm like, oh, I forgot to plan my stuff out for the week. And I'll get on my calendar on my phone. I'll be like, okay, I need to do this. I need to do this. Let's pick a day for this. So I'm getting better at it, but it's a learning process for sure for me.
That's cool.
So cool. Well, I think we both got things to run to, so that should wrap it up. But I think that was a cool one. I'll make sure and leave the clip for that video down in the description so you guys can watch that because it's an awesome TED Talk. So yeah.
I think we should name our monkeys.
Name our monkeys. Mm-hmm. Give them names. What do you want to Roberto and Simeon. I'm going to name one of mine Simeon.
I like it.
But cool. Well, thanks for tuning in and listening. I know it's a lot of friends and family that are watching and listening, but we're really appreciative that you guys take the time out of your day to listen to us rant about stuff. Hopefully this gave you some good insights or tips about procrastination and how we can kind of overcome that. But we will wrap this thing up and we'll see you guys next week.
Ciao.
Ciao.